The other thing you need to do is cultivate, and I'll leave it on this, you could call it an innovative mindset, adaptive mindset, whatever you want. It's adopting that growth mindset, which in essence is a belief. It's a
Yes.
belief that you can constantly learn, grow, and improve, because that opens you to curiosity.
Because the fixed mindset says, I'm born with the intelligence that I'm born with, and nothing I do is going to improve it, which means they stop reading, they stop learning, they stop exploring. They go, oh, that's just me. That's just me.
Welcome to Season 5 of the podcast, Manage Self, Lead Others with host Nina Sunday. This season, we go deeper into innovation, creativity, AI, and the invisible patterns shaping workplace culture. The future of leadership starts with the questions we ask. Join us to explore how to lead with emotional intelligence to elevate team culture and stay future ready.
Today's guest, Nigel Collin, MBA, helps leaders navigate uncertainty by building adaptive teams that make adaptability a daily habit. He's author of The Game of Inches, with a methodology that aligns bottom-up ideas with top-down strategy, so organisations don't just adapt once, but keep adapting and see results compound. Small changes, big results. I'm especially delighted to welcome a repeat guest and longtime friend, Nigel Collin, who first joined us back in episode 71.
Well, welcome, Nigel Collin, to a repeat visit to Manage Self, Lead Others.
Indeed. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, well, you were one of the early episodes, and it was exciting to speak with you as our history working together goes way back.
Dare I say, a long way back.
Yes, and I've seen you present on stage. You're an amazing, animated, informative speaker. So anybody listening, Nigel isn't just an innovation expert. He's also an amazing speaker on the game of inches. And you are doing a doctorate research now on grassroots innovation based on what your discoveries on that trip, and we're going to explore that. And then we'll talk a little bit again about your book, Game of Inches, the philosophy. We'll just see where the conversation leads, Nigel. Tell us, it was about 2013, you decided to hop on a motorbike, do a solo trip around Australia with what question in your mind?
So it was triggered. It happened because a year or so before that, I was at a conference on innovation. There was somebody who got up on stage and basically said, if you're going to be innovative, you've got to be like Steve Jobs. And I remember sitting in the audience having a reaction to that, going, no, you're wrong. And as soon as you go, you've got to be like that, you exclude everybody else. And I grew up in the conference and events industry. I was, a creative director, a content director. I've worked strategically on that side of things for a long time. And I know that some of the best ideas come from people you least expect, right? So I was into motorbikes, and I just had this idea pop into my brain about, I'm going to go out and prove you wrong. I'm going to go out and interview people and prove how creative and innovative we are as a country, and that innovation belongs to everybody. And it was about a year in the making. And eventually I had a client who had a conference in Darwin and agreed to let me be the opening keynote. And the idea was I was living in Sydney at the time, and I rode from Sydney down through to Adelaide, which is the bottom of Australia, then right up through the middle. And so when I got there, I told stories of the people that I'd met on my trip, which was pretty risky because I didn't know who I was going to meet. And it ended up being the start of something beautiful. And even today, all of my work today is based on those early years of Ingenious Oz. Some of the greatest innovations we don't hear about. And there are people, all over the world who are doing incredible things that we don't hear about. And
yeah, well, give us one. Give us one of those innovations.
Okay, well, for example, innovation comes down to product, and it also comes down to process.
Yes,
right, which I think is a very important thing. There's an Indigenous or a First Nations enterprise in Alice Springs called Purple House.
Right.
And basically they provide health services into remote areas, and in particular dialysis, kidney dialysis. And they're based in Alice Springs. And, if you go back 20 or 30 years, if you're a First Nations person, an Indigenous person with kidney issues, you would have to leave your community, you would have to leave your country
Right.
and go to one of the major hospitals, which is
Yes.
incredibly disruptive culturally,
Yes. Because they're
um,
away from their family and away from their home. Yeah.
and away from their land and all
Yeah.
of that. And an elder in Alice Springs had kidney problems, said, why can't you just bring the machines here?
Yeah.
And they went, well, we can't. We don't have the funding. The government won't support us. So basically, he got together with a few of his mates. They did a whole lot of Indigenous artwork, managed to convince two top Australian comedians who, our friends overseas may not know, called Roy and HG. So he convinced them to auction the artwork. So they were the auctioneers at the Sydney Art Gallery or in Sydney. And in one night, they raised $1 million and self-funded, and they've done that ever since. But the point of the story is it's that spark of innovation that I find really intriguing. What instigated the idea in the first place? But not just that, it's that now what's happening is Purple House have dialysis machines throughout regional and remote Australia. They're actually innovating dialysis machines to use a lot less water, and they're knowledge sharing of that with major hospitals. And I spoke to the CEO at the time, who's not Indigenous, she's an English medical practitioner, who basically said to me, and I love this line, Nina, our bosses are our patients and their families. And
Right.
to me, innovation comes from sharing of knowledge. It comes from looking outwards. So yes, they've got on the ground innovations happening, but I think it's the process they go through that's incredibly innovative as well.
So thinking big picture about it, this is people that asked the question, why not? They said, if why not, what can we do to make it happen? But then in the making of it happening, they also then went, how can we make it better? Like, I mean, that's a big leap to go from let's create the service where we want it to let's improve it because they're not improving it.
I often think, yeah, great. And I often think we look at innovation incorrectly. We look at innovation as I have to invent the next big thing, right?
Yes.
But great innovation comes from solving problems. And,
Right.
I like to, in the book, I talk about this concept, which, I heard a number of people say to me is, I found a gap. And it doesn't have to be a big market gap. It can be a gap in your process, the way you do things. It can be a gap in how you share knowledge. It can be a gap in the actual unit itself. So the way we get to that step or that new machine, the innovation for that machine, is not an initial thought of we need to save water. It's as we move forward, we keep searching gaps and we solve those gaps iteratively. Innovation can be an improvement upon an existing product or process as long as it's significant.
Right.
So we
And
often look at innovation as a big invention. No. Innovation can be, and by definition, the government's definition, the OECD's definition, is iterative. And it's interesting because there's a myth out there, and I say it is a myth, that innovation is, it's about the big breakthrough. And what happens when you do that is you miss all of those little innovations that can pay really big dividends.
well, then isn't it continuous improvement when it's small steps?
Well, it is in a way where innovation falls into a number of camps. It is about products and it is about service, and that's where
Yes.
most of the focus is. It is about technology, and that's driving it big time. But innovation is also about soft processes, soft innovation. So you can break it into two camps to get academic on you. There's operational innovation, but there's also relational innovation.
Yes, that's
Communication, knowledge
interesting. That's the
sharing.
soft skills or the power skills,
Yeah, so innovation
interpersonal
is very
skills.
broad. Let's not box it in.
I tell you what, because I've done ProSci change, right? ADCAR.
Yep.
One of the things is human-centered change means you don't let the project managers focus all on installing the new product or service. You've got to bring the hearts and minds of the people with you, and you actually have to have a communication plan. Otherwise, people will resent the change, will resist the change, will almost sabotage the change. They won't use the change. And frequently I'm brought in to talk about change, and you can tell they haven't actually thought about how we're going to get the people on board.
Or
So
what is the impact of the change? My belief is that most people don't think they're very innovative. They don't think they're very creative, and they don't think their ideas are of any value. And I think a lot of that comes down to how we position innovation. You got to be like Steve Jobs. No, you don't. You don't.
Why do so many people think they are not creative? Because I would say 99.9% of babies are born with creativity embedded.
Wow. Okay. It's a
Are you
complex.
going to argue with the percentage?
No, I'm going to give you some. So there's a guy called George Land back in the 60s did a really cool experiment. It's never, to my knowledge, it's never been repeated, and I would love to repeat it. But he basically grabbed a NASA creativity test. And I actually wrote to NASA once asking if they had a copy of it, and they never replied. And I wrote to George Land and asked him if he had a copy.
I'll go and ask him when I'm next in Houston.
Yeah. But basically it's like a creativity IQ, and he trimmed it down for a bunch of kids, right? And he gave a group of kids, this back in the 60s, mind you, right? A creativity test, and a bunch of 5-year-old kids. And of those children, 98% scored highly creative. Now, the test was obviously modified for them, right? But then what he did, he gave the same test, exactly the same test, to the same kids 5 years later. So they're now 10. They've done it before.
Yes.
The amount of kids who scored highly creative, the percentage of them dropped to 30%. It gets better. He then gave it to them when they were another 5 years later. So they've done it twice, same test, it went down to 12%.
Oh.
Then he gave it, and same group, same sample, but then he gave it to a bunch of grown-ups, us, right? 2%. And this is the interesting thing about the research. Now, I would love to do the research again. By the way, it goes back up when you retire.
Oh, yes, because we've got free time to think. But what you're saying is the creativity is embedded. It's just that they don't think they're creative. But if they don't think they're creative, they're not going to do well on a creativity test.
George Land concluded that we don't become less creative. We learn to be, we learn to be uncreative. So
when they're looking at the test, they just don't think in an outside the box sort of way to answer the question.
They learn to be uncreative.
Oh.
But the question in my mind is, okay, if we learn to be uncreative, why? What's going on?
Yes.
And, there's numerous answers to that, but a lot of it is conformity. A lot of it is environmental. A lot of it is peer pressure. A lot of it is an organization's culture. But I think it's really interesting to focus on, well, what are the barriers to it?
Yes.
And one of the things that I discovered when I went out into the wilderness, and I discovered a lot of things and still do, is this idea of taking small, consistent steps, which is why I termed the book Game of Inches, right? Because what that does, it makes it much easier to have small wins, right? If you take a small step forward or have a smaller innovation, an improvement, right, then that builds confidence. And that confidence leads to the next step, and that creates momentum.
Yes.
Whereas if I tackle something really big and audacious, it's far riskier, it's a lot more expensive, and it's harder.
Yes.
And there's
too many moving parts.
Talk about stories forever about bottom line improvement, dollar value of small iterative changes. Stories abound.
Okay. Yeah. Well, here's a scenario. Let's move into how to embed innovation into a culture. And there's top down and bottom up. So top down, we've got a C-suite leader or a manager that is intellectually curious, is wanting to instill the innovative mindset in their people, but the people are not. I'm not creative. How can they awaken their team members' creativity without being hounded down?
Yeah. Interesting question. So I think it falls into two camps. It's process and it's, let's say, mindset culture. So it's hard, soft, right?
Yes. Right.
I think that leader needs to firstly and foremostly give his team permission to be innovative. See, most people won't put an idea forward because they don't think they're going to be heard, or that it's not going to happen, or that they're going to get in trouble, or they're going to be told, no, that's not how we do it.
Or they'll be judged.
Correct.
That's a silly idea.
Correct. And you see this in meetings all the time, right? And so the first one is you absolutely have permission to come up with ideas. There's a guy I met on my very first trip in South Australia owns an engineering company. Without going into too many details, they make farm plow systems, sell them all over the world, sells his IP, his design all over the world. Super successful. He has meetings every week where he gets his team leaders, so the head of the paint department, the head of, distribution, whatever, together. And he goes, what have you done this week to improve your section? Pretty much. Because he knows he's out there chasing big markets. He's got strategy on his plate. He's not going to see those small innovations in the paint shop. And he gave me this example of the guy in the paint shop one day was watching the forklift come in to get the green paint, which is their most used color. And it was at the other end of the shed. And I had to move a pallet. And he thought, that's a waste of time. Gap, right? Gap.
Yes.
So all he did was move one rack of green paint, not the whole lot, just one rack next to the door. So the forklift comes in and goes out. Doesn't need to move anything, doesn't need to dodge anything. And most people, here's the beauty of this. Most people would think, I'm too busy to worry about stupid little things like that. Or they don't see them. They quantified it, right? They worked out how many seconds that saved. And it was only a matter of, 5 or 6 seconds a trip. It was hardly worth any, right?
Petrol, gas.
Well, they then worked it all out. They worked out how many trips does that forklift make a day, a week, a year.
Yes.
And then they quantified it in time, right? How much time did that save? And it turns out the time was equivalent to making 1.5 units of their plow systems, and those things sell in 6 figures.
There you go.
Let's go deeper, right? So that's giving your people permission to do that. He didn't have to go up to the boss and go, hey, do you mind if I try it? He just did it and measured it, right? Mm-hmm. Multiply that through every unit of an organization.
Yep.
It's massive. Now,
that's the principle of Kaizen, which is your job is not just to do the job. Your job is to find ways to improve how the job is done.
Yeah, brilliant.
So Kaizen, there's definitely room for Kaizen to be.
Yeah, and I think Kaizen is usually about process, right? But let's extend Kaizen theory into communication, into operation, into relational factors, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about informal and formal meetings for knowledge sharing. How do we improve those? So I think the first thing a CEO or an owner of a company needs to do is give their people permission. With that, you have to have permission to fail as long as you learn.
And that's installing a mindset of psychological safety, because if someone comes up with a silly idea and everybody laughs, but they're laughing at the idea, not with.
Well, not just that, the rest of the group.
They're going to button their lip and not say another thing again.
Well, the whole group will shut up.
Yeah.
Because I don't want that to happen to me.
I know.
We're done. We're done. Yeah. Right? But the other challenge here, and this is what my doctoral research is on, is yes, you can give your people permission to innovate from the bottom up. And there's benefits to this, because if you're close to the problem, you're going to have greater ownership of that problem, of solving that problem, because it has direct benefit to you. But also the solution you find is going to be fit for purpose. It's not just some idea. It actually is solving a very specific problem because I'm close to that problem. Now, the challenge with that is, how do we align that bottom-up innovation with the top-down strategy of our organization? Because what you don't want are people in an organization just coming up with ideas. I worked for a large franchise group who run cafes around Australia, so cafe restaurants. And the example they had is a few years back, one of their staff members went, "We should sell sushi." and it's like, but that's not who we are.
Coffee is hot, sushi is cold.
But they're not. They're like other stuff, and so you don't want incongruent ideas. You want ideas that are relevant, fit for purpose. And this is why I love the word ingenious, because ingenious means unique and fit for purpose.
Right.
So you need that bottom up innovation, because there is just gold in it. And you need to give people permission and confidence to do that. And that takes a process as well. How do we actually do that? Which is why something like Kaizen is good. But you also need that alignment of bottom up, top down. So you need to be very, very clear about what the rules of the game are, about what your vision is, what your strategy is. What is it we're trying to achieve as an organization? Who are we? What do we stand for? All of
And
that.
that's a question that the manager can go with their team at a group meeting and maybe write it up on the whiteboard, or I like flip charts because then you can keep them and fold them and put them up again. So we're
I'd go a
coming
step
to the
further.
end of our time, Nigel, and this has been a fascinating conversation. So, what are the actionable takeaways that you can give guidance to? Let's assume it's the intellectually curious manager that does want to embed innovation mindset with their people. What's 2 or 3 things they can do tomorrow?
Okay, the first one is permission. Beyond a
Permission.
shadow of doubt. And with that, I'm going to group it together. With that is clarity of what we're trying to achieve, not how we're going to do it, what we're doing, who we are. One of the I think one of the big issues. Here's the other thing that you can do is one of the big issues. People don't put forward ideas, and you said it right at the start because they don't feel heard. And that's so true. Like, why am I even going to try if it's going to fall on deaf ears?
That's right.
The other thing you need to do is cultivate, and I'll leave it on this, you could call it an innovative mindset, adaptive mindset, whatever you want. It's adopting that growth mindset, which in essence is a belief. It's a belief that you can constantly learn, grow, and improve, because that opens you to curiosity.
Because the fixed mindset says, I'm born with the intelligence that I'm born with, and nothing I do is going to improve it, which means they stop reading, they stop learning, they stop exploring. They go, oh, that's just me. That's just me. Well,
and people always go, oh, how do I get 100% growth mindset? Well, you can't, because by definition, that wouldn't work. Because it's constantly learning. Disney have this wonderful philosophy they teach their creative people of saying yes and not yet but.
Yes.
When you say yes but, it just brings the shutters down. When you say yes and, you're continuing the conversation and being curious. And it doesn't mean you agree or disagree with an idea. It just means you're like, oh, tell me more. And if you can swing your culture or the language with an organization from yes but to yes and, unless you're an actuary or doing risk assessment, right? That helps promote the whole innovation thing.
I love this conversation, Nigel. You are a mine of good ideas. Thank you so much.
If you want to explore more of Nigel Collin's work, check out his Ingenious Oz podcast and videos at nigelcollin.com.au, or head to Amazon for his book, The Game of Inches, in paperback, Kindle or audiobook. My name is Nina Sunday, and this is the Manage Self Lead Others show. Stay tuned, we have more conversations coming your way.
Manage Self Lead Others has launched the book. It's available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. Not just a collection of transcripts, Nina Sunday adds her own reflections about each guest conversation. Plus, you might like to join Nina on her Substack channel, ninasunday.substack.com, for candid, behind-the-scenes conversations with 2 sharp AI hosts who riff, question, and bounce around ideas sparked by the published podcast episode. And if you're looking for a conference speaker or workshop facilitator who can up-level your team in Australia or around the world, visit brainpowertraining.com.au or ninasunday.com. Until you tune in next time.